Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I am your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have with me a very special guest, Michael Webb. Michael, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here, Daniel.
Yeah. I was really excited to see you on Facebook. I got to say, Michael, those I just saw the books right away when you were holding them in the group that we share, and I was just like, click. Yep. I was like, follow. I sent the Facebook message right away, and then I was going to check out some of the things that you had posted and stuff like that, and I was just like, yep, we got to get this guy for the podcast. So it's really
that's the power of a good book cover. It's a powerful thing.
Yeah. And then we keep talking on here about that powerful book cover that brings you in. And I was originally going to be I want to be an illustrator, so I love art. I love book covers.
Yeah.
And we talked about how the demographics and things like that, and what a book good book cover does. But then I have to say, though, going immediately to your book descriptions, your book blurbs, I was immediately hooked right there. And I just keep trying to mention that to people, that between the the cover, and the book blurb, and I actually really liked your layout. Like just in general. I felt like it was very aesthetically pleasing. It just made me feel like you were organized, and if somebody's organized with, publishing their product, to me, it just seems like they're going to be much more organized writing their product. Yeah, but I really liked your blurbs and descriptions. That was really what sold me. I was like, okay, we got to get them. So I was really happy to get you on today. So, and like I said, We'll start in right with that first question. So go ahead and tell us about yourself, and what has your writing journey been like up until this point?
Cool. My name is Michael Webb. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm married. I got a son who's 13. I only recently picked up writing. I graduated with a degree in marketing, computer science, and math. So the exact opposite of writing. The whole left brain, right brain thing.
Yeah.
I think I've got it mixed up somewhere. Just finding that creativity side, because I'm much more of an Excel, math, numbers type of person. But yeah, I studied that. I've been working for a wholesale distribution company since I graduated college, so like 20 years. I manage a shared purchasing center with them. Once I got into writing, I kind of started crafting a story, not really sure where that was going to go. And I published my first book this past April 2021, which was awesome. It was so exciting. It's a huge feat. Never would have seen myself doing something like that. But it's been great. It kind of, first it was just selling some to friends and family, and then it kind of took off. Amazon gave it a life of its own, and I worked hard on the second book, which published just this past week, actually, at the beginning of December. And I'm working on book 3 right now. So it's basically going to be a trilogy, young adult epic fantasy trilogy, and I'm super pumped getting it out there. It's been great to see all the different people reaching out, contacting me online from other countries. Even I have no clue who they are, and you get to see reviews that they'll leave online, and it's really encouraging and kind of surprising in a way of, wow, that I wrote something and put it out there, and some random person's picking it up and enjoying it. So
yeah.
It's been really cool. It's been quite the journey.
Yeah. And then, of course, guys, Michael, gets random guys asking him to be on their podcast and things like that. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me because, again, when I was looking at, your book description and genre and things like that, I just thought it was interesting because I had literally just re-listened to, I'm trying to get Lindsay Broker on really soon, and they have like their fantasy sci-fi marketing podcast that they turn into the Six Figures podcast, I believe is what it's called. Sorry, Lindsay. But I was just re-listening to one of their old episodes where they talked about how hard it was to get into young adult. And I'm listening to Michael R. Fletcher, Rob J. Hayes, Dirk Ashton, Jed Hearn at the Wizards Words and Words podcast. They said the same thing. So I just thought it was so funny where then I'm looking at your sales and everything, and I'm like, well, apparently Michael's got what we need, and we haven't had a lot of young adult come on yet. So I was really happy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely there's a specific audience, but young adults interesting because it's not just young adults. You're not selling to middle schoolers and high schoolers. You're selling from ages 12 up till 90. Most of my readers are adults, and I enjoy reading young adult myself. And it's just one of those things that just kind of takes off. And now I'd mentioned it before. I sold 15,000 copies now in the last 8 months or so. And a lot of that's Kindle Unlimited, a lot of ebooks. Then paperbacks, hardbacks, some sell some in person to like local events, like craft events and stuff. I'll go do author signings, and actually have some school visits coming up.
Oh, that's
Going to visit some local middle schools around in the area, which I found absolutely eat them up.
oh, yeah.
They read them in about a day, even though they're like that thick.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's fun. I'll go talk with schools about the craft of writing and what it means to be an author, and give them a chance to buy a book and get a picture taken with them, and so that'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to those coming up.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I just think it's funny that you mentioned that, because a lot of people that I've heard have, people have said, "Oh, we wonder if this will work." A lot of people haven't tried it that I've listened to. They said, "Oh, this is probably a really good idea," and I do agree with you. I think that's. I just feel like just getting kids involved in reading. I'm a teacher, so a lot of my kids are like, "When's your book coming out?" Like, this or that. Like, well, it's
Yeah.
not really young adult. Like, I guess you could read it at 14. I don't really put anything inappropriate in. Really,
Yeah.
maybe it's about sci-fi and the world building. But yeah, I agree with you.
Right.
I will fly through a young adult book, and some of them now, I think young adults
Mhm.
kind of like indie publishing, right, where it has a different meaning now than it used to. So
Yeah.
it's like
They
almost
don't care where the book came from.
yeah,
They just like reading books.
yeah, which is
Yeah.
good, right? Because just eat them up, and then you can do another trilogy and just keep going to be like, I like.
Uh-huh. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, that's really cool. So book. Yeah. Obviously, in question 2 here. Tell us more about your books. Obviously, I read the script and things like that, but let our audience know, and I'll let them know exactly what I was thinking that I really liked about it.
Yeah. So The Last Shadow Knight is the first book. That's what I published in April. The whole trilogy is the Shadow Knights Trilogy. And then the one that just came out is Rise of the Shadow. It's young adult epic fantasy, and it's your classic good versus evil battle. It's got the chosen one themes in there. It's got these secret society. It's got these people who train with. It's a lot of sword fighting, a lot of action adventure, a lot of twists and turns. But I focus a lot on character building. Taking characters through this journey of how do they start, how do they end, and there's one main character, but there's really 3 mostly main characters. And I try to make it as this interesting examination of where do they start in their life, and they're all young adults. They start a little younger, and they progress as the course of the story goes. But they grow up in different places. Like one of them is kind of living on the streets in this medieval setting, because it's a fantasy world, so of course it's medieval and there's castles and stuff. And then one of them is actually 2 of them are a son and a daughter of these lords of the city, so they're coming up in money. But what I examine is the impact of the people in their lives, the influences they have, and how over the course of the trilogy, how that affects their lives and changes their decisions and who they end up becoming. I really wrote the story for my son as a way to give an example of what does it mean to work hard towards something. To be in a situation and have things not come easy, and to push yourself and train and practice, and to have this incredible massive goal that seems impossible, that you work hard toward, and then you're able to excel at it through that hard work. So I think that's kind of cool. I try to weave some positive messaging through it, but at the heart, it's just an adventure story. It's meant to be fun. It's a very easy read. Like my son read it in like a day and a half, and he's already begging me for book 3, even though I'm only in the first draft of it. He's like, yeah, just let me read it. Like, no, give me some time. But yeah, it's kind of the genre range. It's in that Harry Potter, Aragon, Ranger's Apprentice, Percy Jackson, kind of that. Yeah, so all those type of books, and I find a lot of those people who enjoy those really enjoyed my books, and I'm looking forward to what comes after this, because I've got all these ideas brewing in my head of where to go from here.
Well, that's super cool. I thought it was interesting because I'm reading reviews and things, and it's just, again, so funny when I'm listening at older podcasts and things, and now these are like 3-4 years old, and they're talking about the chosen one and how that doesn't work anymore. And then I was listening to another one where they're like, yeah, everything comes back around. And I just think it's funny though, because I think a lot of people discount the fact that like I was given certain books by my uncle, fantasy and sci-fi, and then he was looking for something different. But then I had gotten into these older books, and then I was looking for something different because I liked these books. And I just think it's funny because I think we forget, especially with young adult, you know, like I think you have a really good thing going. You get the people coming and going, right? You get these newer readers who have never experienced anything like that, or maybe very few, because
Right.
there's not a lot of John Flanagan, you know, there's not a lot of, Percy Jacksons, things like that, you know, and I think a lot of people forget that that's where a lot of readers start. And then, again, you said, right, you have your whole length of the spectrum, people that want to go back and remember those are some of the best books, where those types of themes and adventure and things like that. I'm a big Forgotten Realms fan, Dragonlance, and I think it's a good spot that you're in, because you're gonna get people coming and going within the genre,
Right.
nostalgia, or it's new for people, and then they're gonna, whatever you have to write, and good those older titles that we all maybe really enjoy and things like that. So I think that's a really good strategy that you have going there.
Thanks.
Yeah, super cool. And I like those themes too. As a teacher, obviously, I'm like, please, we need more themes like that. So
Yeah.
For question 3 here, so what made you decide to start writing?
It's funny because I turned 40, and for me, it kind of became a bucket list thing.
Oh, cool.
I had never written anything. I was not a writer. I despised writing when I was younger. Like in school, you get a writing assignment. I'm like cringing, like, okay, how many words? How wide can I space these lines to get as few words as possible? I didn't like it at all.
Give yourself 2 middle names,
Yeah.
John Claude.
Change the font size.
Yeah.
But I'm big at setting goals and trying to like setting a bucket list thing of like a while ago I decided I wanted to run a marathon. So it was like I kind of got into running just casually on my own, and I thought, hey, it'd be cool to run a marathon. Like, all right, if I'm going to do this, I better do it now, because it's not going to get easier the older I get. So I looked out 6 months and picked a date and signed up for it and trained for it. And that was the first race I ever ran, was a marathon. So, because I thought that'd be a cool thing to check off a list.
Yeah.
And I saw writing the same way. I thought, I always loved reading. Huge reader ever since I was little. I love how you can read a story and it just, it's all the interesting bits. Like I love moments in stories, like in The Way of Kings, when Kaladin's training Bridge 4 and they're like kind of growing. It's like, man, I just get so pumped up at that. Or like in Hunger Games, when Katniss is going through her training, like shoots the apple out of the pig's mouth. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. So it was like these moments in books that just like make you feel awesome. It's like, I want to do that. Like I want to create my own moments that people read and get goosebumps from reading it. And I just thought that'd be amazing to be able to put something out there in the world. And, I figured it would be like my couple of friends and family would buy it and that would be it. But I was fine with that. I said, all right, I'm going to put something out there and I'll get a handful, maybe 20, 30 people will read it. And, they'll tell me they like it, but of course they're, my brother and my parents. And so, you don't really know. I just thought it'd be a fun thing to do. So that it became a bucket list thing. And, when I quickly realized I was getting in over my head as far as what I expected the effort would take, because you can't just spend a little bit of time writing and then get this finished product and then you're done. No, it's like the work starts after you write the book. Because what I realized was I didn't want to put something bad out there, because it took so much work into getting that first draft done, way more than I expected. But I had the dedication. I would get up, I'd start writing around 5:15 in the morning. I'd spend an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours before work for my regular job. So I would do that almost every day, and sometimes on the weekends. And it took so much effort to get that first draft done, which I celebrated. But I realized, if I am going to spend this much time writing this draft, why don't I take that extra time to make it good?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't good. Like every first draft, I have learned, every author, no matter how great you are, Stephen King famously has said this, every first draft is junk. And that's true. My first draft was. And so it was, I realized I had to put in that extra effort to kind of craft it into an actual story, a real book. But I just thought it was fun. That was what I really started with, was, all right, sounds like a cool thing. I'll write a book, and a few people will read it and be able to tell my own story. And that was cool.
And here you are, like thousands of books later. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
I totally feel you on the draft one. I like spent all this time building this world for decades, and then I have probably like five or
Mhm.
six draft like different stories. I've gotten like 20,000 and stopped. I this year last year I was like, okay, I'm gonna finish something, and I finished my first
Mhm.
draft, and then I was like, people are like I like. Of course, I couldn't pick a point of view, so I have one
Hmm.
chapter, one point of view, and then of course I had no idea where the characters were gonna go. So now draft two, I'm just like I'm redoing the entire outline. And Scott Oden,
Yeah.
I talked to him a lot and interviewed him twice, and he does like a
Hmm.
50-page outline for like
Wow.
yeah, and like but I'm like, well, I'm not gonna be able to do that. But I actually really started
Hmm.
to re-outline everything so I can be like, okay, this is a discrepancy. And then I
Yeah.
figured I'm trying to learn from my mistakes, but I definitely feel you there as yeah, draft one's
Mhm.
not going to be good. Everyone wants to read. I'm like, nope, wait till draft two. Draft two will be readable at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I definitely
That's true.
definitely know that feeling. So I'm glad someone else had it.
Yeah.
I like this fourth question here. So what was it like when you began?
Mhm.
That's a great question.
Hmm. It was it was kind of awkward at first, because I didn't have a background in writing. I hadn't warmed up with short stories or anything else, and um, I really didn't even know if I could do it. So when I first set the goal, I thought, all right, I'll try this out. I don't know that I can write a book, or I didn't know if I put words on a paper and I read it back, does it sound so bad that okay, this is just useless.
Yeah.
Um, so I started, but writing in fantasy, you I felt you can't just start. You've got to do a little bit of prep work. Even at a minimum, you got to start thinking through what's the world you're building. You got to have some idea of the story you're looking to tell. Now, there's plenty of authors that would argue, no, you don't need to do that. You can make it. I'm not a pantser. I am very much a
Yeah.
plotter. I like to plan ahead. So I did a lot of work into world building and even doing some research into stuff like sword fighting or medieval life. What was it like? And so I spent a little bit of time doing that. Not a ton. I probably should have done more. But I first started writing, and I remember I went out to a restaurant, sat by myself, got my laptop up, and put down 2,000 words or so. And I'm like, all right, I got a chapter. What's it like? And I go back and I read it afterwards, and I'm like, you know what? It's not awful. So like, I think I can do this. And that was what I was worried about. Is I would read it back. I'm like, that is just the worst thing I have ever seen in my life. There's no point in continuing on. But it wasn't that. Now, if I were to have saved that very first draft of my first chapter and look back at it now, I'm sure it was awful. I just didn't know enough then to make that determination. But I felt at the time it was good enough. But so what I did at the beginning was just I stumbled my way along, chapter after chapter, writing just word after word every day, plugging away, and the story kind of went all over the place, because I hadn't learned the craft very well. I've done so much learning since then, listening to podcasts and trial and error, working with editors, working with beta readers, reading other books, looking for certain things. But that first time, I'm just kind of like going here, there, and everywhere and jumping around. The story goes one direction, now it's jumping out something like, oh, I can't do that. And I'm info dumping all over the place, and trying to all these awful like passive voice and filtering words. And yeah, it was bad. But at the beginning, that was fine. I'm getting words on paper, just getting the story out there. And that's what I learned, is that most of the writing comes after the story has been written, if you're going to make it good, at least. But that first part was, it was exciting. It was fun. I loved the story creation part. That's my favorite part of the whole process in writing a book, is just the raw creation of the story. And like I said, you get those moments, those exciting moments. It's like a big twist, or a big moment where the main character does something great, and like I'm like grinning while I'm writing it, and I can't wait for people to read it, because I'm like, oh, this is gonna get them right here. Ironically, my wife, she had been busy. She hadn't finished book 2 yet, the one that just published. Right before we got on the podcast, I hear this shriek from upstairs. And she comes down the stairs and she said, I can't believe what you just did. Like, I know what part she's reading, but just that response, it's like,
Yeah.
I built these characters, I'm telling this story, and she is could you do this? This is awful. Excuse me. But it's moments like that. That's why I love telling stories, is you create an emotional response in someone about the story that they're invested in. And that's the fun of it for me.
Yeah, it's super cool. I definitely agree with you. It's very unique. I like I was just telling the kids, like, we do like these silly questions and stuff at the start of class just to kind of emotionally check in with them. And I always like to throw them off. So I said, what's one movie that's made you cry? And they were like so into it. And I was surprised at some of their answers. And we've done in the past, like what books made you emotional, in some way, like has made you triumphed or, sad or something.
Mm.
I just think it's interesting to see what they say with movies too, because I consider that the same thing, right? Stories. So yeah, it's definitely a unique thing. And I think of those, you think of those books that you've read, where it's been the same thing. So yeah, it's a unique thing, right? Where you take something in your brain and you make somebody feel an emotion for it. It's definitely, there's very few things, right, other than art, I think, or dance, that's like writing. It's very unique thing that we do, right? It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I hope that you make the rest of us shriek too with that spot in book 2.
Yeah.
I'm gonna message you too when I get there, and I'm gonna like just on Facebook Messenger. Maybe it'll just be like Michael Scott like yelling, no, or something like that. All right, well, this next one, did you publish yourself or did you go through a traditional publisher?
I never even considered going through a traditional publisher, because like I said, originally my goal was I'm just going to sell a few copies to friends and family. And I had no thought that my book would be good enough to be picked up by a traditional publisher. And I know from all the people I've talked with and stuff, you need to find an agent, which is extremely difficult to get an agent to pick you up. And then if you get an agent, it's extremely difficult to get a publishing company to pick you up. And then if that all, you hit the lottery and all that happens for a no-name first-time author, best case scenario, that took you 2 years to accomplish that. So this impossible odds of something that's probably never going to happen. I don't want to wait 2 years or 3 years or 4 years to determine, okay, it's not going to happen. I just need to do it myself. Because my goal was, I just want to get the book out there. So from day one, I always knew I wanted to do it myself. And as I've gone over time, I've really learned that it's not like it used to be. It used to be everyone's goal was traditional publishing. And that was, that you made it. That that's your stamp of approval, that your work is good. That's your chance of success, because I think everyone's impression is if you get signed by a traditional publisher, they're going to make you famous. Yeah. They're going to do all this work and they're going to get your book in front of so many more people. But in reality, that's not the case. They sign people because, they have a mailing list following of 20,000 people already. They have this other platform where I know we're going to sell books with them, but ultimately the traditional publisher makes most of the profit from your book. So I knew I wasn't going to get picked up, and I knew there's not that great benefit if I did. So I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to get the book out there. I'm not going to wait a couple of years for it to happen. But what I took, the approach I took is there's a lot that a traditional publisher brings to the table, which is they're going to edit it. They're going to cover design. They're going to at least help you or direct you in marketing. So I just figured I need to get good on that myself. So I'm covering the costs myself. I'm finding the right people, the professionals to do those steps. Because I knew if I'm going to make a good book, that I can't do those myself. I can't be my own editor. I can't design my own covers. And I needed to learn a lot about marketing. Thankfully, I have some background in marketing and business and how, ways to reach out. And I think that's been a lot of the success of the books, is a lot of that initial push I did to get the word out. But I absolutely love indie publishing. It gives me all the control. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. And it's been great. And I get much higher royalties because of that. And I have found that it's not been limiting to the reach I've had. Yes, you sell less paperbacks as an indie author. You sell more ebooks, but 10,000 copies, 15,000 copies. I'm not complaining. I would be making a fraction of what I'm making right now had I gone through a traditional publisher. So it's been a good choice.
Well, it's just funny. I think it's like serendipity. I feel like that, I stumbled. Well, I saw, like you were advertising book 2 the other day with your posts in our mutual group, because I was just listening to I was listening to some podcast, and they were talking about, I was listening to Daniel Green interview Brandon Sanderson a couple years ago, and I just thought it was really interesting. With they were talking about, and Will White was on season 2. I was re-listening to Wizards, Warriors, and Words, and he was talking about getting on New York Times bestseller list for the audiobooks, and he was like talking about selling 20,000 copies of one book, and most people don't know how much how many books that actually is. So I just thought it funny that I saw your post, because I was like, man, you got somebody selling 15,000 copies. I don't care if it's 3 books, 4 books, 5 books, and it was just very interesting to me, because I was just listening to them talk about that kind of thing. So yeah, it's bravo to you for whatever you're doing marketing wise, or in these groups. So clearly it's working. So
yeah.
Super cool.
Thanks.
Right. And if anybody's not understanding, again, what I'm talking about here, so I met Michael through one of those mutual Facebook groups. I think I mentioned quite a bit, like a lot of the fantasy, sci-fi, horror, grimdark, things like that. And Sean Crow and some other people like Mark Timoney had said, like they go into these groups on Facebook and they'll say, hey, I got book 1 or book 2 or book 3 coming out. And we've talked a lot on here about how that has been working more for them than Facebook ads. And of course, you just have to find the right group and the right day to post, and that's a free post. So, in the ones that we're looking at, some people, they want you to pay and things like that. So we're trying to steer people towards, finding those groups where you could promote on those free days, because obviously indie publishing, like you said, you eat all the costs. So it's nice to find those, those free to advertise. So
you got to get creative.
Yeah. And I will be actually showcasing a later episode this month about those different groups. So if you want to take a look at that podcast, maybe you'll find some newer indie groups or something like that where you can actually advertise for free on certain days. So and that'll be for everybody up, just so you guys know in the audience. Number 6 here, again, doing the work yourself. What did it take to go from a first to a final draft?
A ton of work. It was, like I said, the first draft was rough, very rough, and I didn't even know how rough it was at the beginning, but I knew I needed to revise it a lot. So I went to I read a couple books on editing. I read Stephen King's on writing, which was extremely helpful. Another book on developmental editing. There's a book on that. And so I used those things and went back and attacked my, the last Shadow Knight, the first book, went back and go through that. And I'm like, oh, I got to change this, got to redo that, I got to do this. I spent a ton of time redoing it. I'm like, okay, now it's good. In my mind, that's what I was thinking. So then I got with a few family members, say, hey, I got this out here. I'd love some feedback. Any of y'all interested in being, I called it alpha reader at the time. It's like, hey, it's still early, but I'd love, point out any plot holes or character issues. And so I had a couple family members that helped with that. And it was good. They pointed out a lot of stuff, a lot of, especially plot things. I'm like, okay, this doesn't make sense. They wouldn't have done that because of this. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Let me tweak that and change it. So I did a lot of changes, and I'm like, all right, now it's good. So then I hired a developmental editor to help with that, the story construction, the character arcs, the plot, the pacing of the book. Say, all right, here we go. And they spent about a couple months going through it and coming back, tore it up, red pen. I had 14,000 line edits to review. Wow. in the manuscript for the last Shadow Knight, which was, I looked at that, I'm like, oh, okay, I can do this. But it was rough, but it's learning. It's like, that's my education on writing is, okay, why did they mark this out? Okay, I see, that makes sense. Yep, I got to file that in my head of, I got to look for those things when I do that. So I painstakingly worked through it, made all the updates and edits, and added some new chapters, removed some other stuff. And then that editor, they were willing to do a second look. So there's a developmental edit, and then I make my changes, and then they look through it again to see
cool.
with the changes, what was it like. So I got a second round of developmental editing.
Yeah.
And then I figured, before I go to copy editing, which I wanted to be, that's the last thing, that's, make everything formatted, all the punctuation, grammar, and everything. I wanted to get some more feedback, and I almost skipped this step, and I am so thankful I didn't. But finding beta readers. So these are, the work is just about done, but you're looking for some other people who enjoy reading in that genre to read it and give feedback. Kind of similar to my alpha readers, but it's a more polished version. So I reached out on Facebook, a few different groups, and I had 4 or 5 people that ended up beta reading. And out of all the steps, this was possibly the most helpful, the most educational for me. Because again, a lot of them are writers, because they're also in these groups looking for beta readers. And so they come back and again, tore it up. Like all this stuff, like showing and not, or I'm telling instead of showing stuff. I'm info dumping. That was a huge one. I cut almost the entire first chapter after feedback from my beta readers. All these just awkward phrases and ways to rewrite things. And so I'm getting all these multiple different authors reviewing it and giving me feedback, and I'm updating as I go. And I even did it in 2 rounds. So it was a few beta readers, and whoa, yeah, fix that. Okay, let's get a couple more beta readers. Okay, yep, fix that. But by the time I got to the end of that process, I was no longer seeing change this, this is bad, this needs to be done. I'm finally seeing, oh, here's one small thing. Oh, I love this part. Oh, this is, you might want to tweak this. And then awesome book. I absolutely loved it. So it's like I saw that progression of tons of work, tons of changes, tons of problems, and then gradually got to, wow, this is really good. Holy cow, this is an awesome book. Can't wait to read the next one. I'm like, all right, now I'm good. Like I've got to that place, but it's basically, crowdsourcing, helping writing my book. And that was my education of all these different authors and editors and, friends and family even, that all contributed as part of that. And then I did copy editing, and I did formatting and proofreading at the end. But by that point, the story was done. That's what I needed to work on, was crafting the story. And it took 18 months, which in some ways can be a long time. For a lot of writers, that's actually very short, especially for a first book. But I spent a ton of time. It was probably 700 hours, I estimated, that I spent on beginning to end of all the work that I put into it. And then once it finally got to that final draft, I'm pumped. I hired a cover designer, which was probably the best decision I made. Like, I absolutely love the covers on both of my books. And tomorrow, actually, I have an appointment with my designer for book 3. So I can't wait to see what that's going to be like. Yeah, so that was, it was a lot of work. I'm glad I did it myself. That's how I learned. And then as I got into Rise of the Shadow, the second book, 8 months start to finish. My first draft of Rise of the Shadow was probably more like my 4th or 5th draft of The Last Shadow Knight. Oh, wow. Because I learned so much during that. So I'm writing to begin with in the way that I want it to be, rather than all those mistakes that I ended up having to cut and change from the first book. So it was a fun process.
Yeah. Well, you got a lot of really good stuff there that people have not said. I like alpha readers. I've heard of a couple people handing it to, a couple people they know or something like that, but that's actually a really good, I think that's a really great idea, especially if you haven't found your voice yet, a couple of books. So yeah, I like that. And I actually do I know a couple people, like Michael R. Fletcher said, he tends to stay away from writers for beta reading, but I actually really like that idea, because especially like you said, right? Like if you're really learning from the process, that could be really helpful. Somebody like him who's on book 11 probably, who has the voice, the tone, things like that, maybe it's a little bit different. I think it also depends on how you take feedback. I love feedback personally. I'd rather just have your feedback right away and make something better and do it quicker, rather than waste 6 months on my own. Rather, that's great advice right there. I'm really glad that, obviously that's working for you. So for that book 1, that's really awesome. Number 7 here. So starting with no fan base. That's a great one. How'd you get started having people buy your first book? That's always like one of the hardest things people have talked about out here. So and that's what one thing that really drew me to, trying to get you on here right away is like, like Mark Timoney has Blood of the Spear. It's got Felix Ortiz doing the cover. And he said, he's like, man, it's like hard to find people to read. And I'm like, well, look at your book, look at the description. I'm like, everything seems perfect. So I just find it really interesting, how many you sold for, these 2 books. So yeah, like what do you do with no fan base and how did you build that?
Yeah. So that's the biggest challenge I found most authors have faced. I've gotten to know a ton of authors during this process. I say easy, but the part that you can control is write a good story, have a good cover, write a good blurb. You can do all that, but that doesn't mean you get readers. You put it out on Amazon and you get 0 readers because people don't know your book. They don't know that it's out there. So I worked tirelessly at getting it out in different areas. And I had a dozen different marketing things. Some of them probably didn't pay off. Some of them were great. But I started probably 3 months before it published. A big push was reaching out to book bloggers. I contacted probably 120, 130 book bloggers, book reviewers, book Instagram type of reviewers, just offering, hey, free copy. Yeah. And so I pitched the book. Hey, this is what the book's about. I see you do a lot of this stuff. You interested? I'd love to send you a free copy. Out of 130 people I contacted, I think I had 6 that replied back. And that was tough. It's like, because you're nobody. You have nothing to base it on other than here's my cover, here's the title of my book, and here's me asking you to read a copy. But time is valuable to people. They don't want to just read some random thing unless something really draws them in about it. So I had to do a ton of work just to get those 6, it may have been 7 people who actually read it to review it. But then every one of those was a post on social media, a review on Amazon and Goodreads. Some of them have websites or blogs that they'll post those on. So that's an additional reach of a few people. I did some Goodreads giveaways, give away free copies of, I did one on the ebook right before it launched, and then I did a paperback giveaway later on. I did a couple podcasts. I reached out to a lot of different people of, hey, I'm writing this book. I'd love to be on your podcast. Most of the time I get crickets in response. Every once in a while you get oh, thank you for the offer, but we're going to pass. And again, it's you're asking people to invest their time in you. And until you have something to hang your hat on, something to say, this is my credentials, you're breathing into the wind, and it's very difficult. So I had a lot of rejection on that, but I just kept at it, talking to more and more people. I did a few ads on Amazon, not a ton. I went through a class, Brian Cohen's class on Amazon. It's a great class on Amazon ads. So I got a few reads from there. I think most of that early stuff was just tons and tons of work, getting out the word, social media. I did a lot of social media connecting on Instagram, on Facebook, mostly Instagram. Just putting it out on every post I can to get visibility. A lot of times it takes seeing things. I think people say 7 times you need to see something before you really consider buying it. So you get one post here, you get another post here, and you finally start to get some traction of, I got this person to read it and they did a post. And so now I got mine and theirs. And eventually that just started to pick up. And of course I did all my friends and family. So all my regular Facebook contacts, and, I would sell probably about 50 to 60 to old high school friends or old church friends or college friends and family members. And so they would start to do it. But that's this initial jump that's inevitable. You're going to sell it to your friends and family, but then it drops down on that curve. And then the big question is what happens after that. So for me, I did all this work into pushing it, getting all my friends and family to leave reviews and also to share it on their social media. And once it dropped down, it stayed down for about a month. It was low, and I'm like, okay, this is probably where we're at. And then that momentum started to kick up. And I think what ended up happening, it was all that work combined to get just every little bit it could. And then Amazon just kind of did the rest. Because once you can you get some reviews, you can get some traffic on it, you get some sales on it, and you get good feedback on it. So I think a lot of that is you have to have a good book. You have to have something that's engaging, that makes people want to tell their friends about it, makes them want to read the second book. And then also, I dropped the ebook price. Originally, I had it for $9.99. I don't know why I thought I could get people to buy it for that much. I dropped it to $3.99, and that's when it really took off. So people started buying the ebook more. Kindle Unlimited. Most of my money comes from reads on Kindle Unlimited. So that's huge. So all of those just started like every week, every month. It went up. It was like 4 months straight of this steady rise in sales, to where I was selling 60 to 70 a day, either through sales or reads through Kindle Unlimited. But all the time continuing to market every chance I can. Every time I can get a post out on social media, every podcast I can get on, just trying to get the word out. And then what's great is, now that I just launched my second book, Rise of the Shadow, I didn't have to do any of that hardly, because I did put so much work into hitting the streets, getting the word out, begging for reviews. And now that I'm with the second book, I put the pre-order out about a month and a half ahead of time. I didn't even have a cover when I put the pre-order out there. I didn't even tell anyone it's out there. And then I checked a couple days later, had 100 pre-orders for it.
Oh,
like,
awesome.
Holy cow. Like, yeah, like who's buying this book? Like, I didn't even say it was out there. And then, so I had 1,200 sales by the time I released it. And then the first day, it jumped up to number 700 on Amazon, just from Kindle Unlimited downloads on the first day. That's 711 out of 4 million. And it was number one in its category, number one new release in its category. Wow. And I didn't have to do hardly anything. So it's like I found this sweet spot of you're building a fan base. And I'm trying to capture emails every chance I can for a newsletter. So it's like this dedicated fan base, and able to tell them when books come out. And now a lot of people like to, poo-poo Amazon of being this huge organization, but they are great for authors, and they do my work for me. Of someone's reading books and they like certain things, and they say, "Oh, I think you might like The Last Shadow Knight," and they'll send them an email. Some of my friends said, "Hey, I just got this email," and they'll say, "You may enjoy," and I'll have my book on there. Like, that's cool. I didn't have to do that. So I think that's been a lot of it. It took a ton of work to get that momentum going. But once the momentum got going, it's like, they call it the halo effect. It's out there on Amazon, and they're suggesting it, all these also bots, and you may enjoy, and I'm not doing any of that. And it's really paid off, just as continual readership every month. It's been steady. And now, of course, I have a huge jump this month, and I'm excited to see what it'll be once book 3 comes out this next summer.
Yeah. It'd be really cool to see that, that progression of just the sales, and just generally, like your experience with, the release process. It's super cool. Yeah. And just for the audience, if you know any authors that don't have a product or writing or whatever stage, all right, tell them to contact me. All right. Everybody's welcome, especially book 1. I'd love to get people on the ground floor, help them out. So send them my way, and I will have them on the podcast. So that's what I was really trying to tell people recently. Like, a couple of people who I think are bigger names were like, "Oh, what's it about?" And I'm like, "Well, we're trying to, just to get fantasy and sci-fi out there, particularly books, comics, things like that." And I think a couple of people were kind of like, "No, it's not really a big deal, that kind of thing." There's no Daniel Green or anything, so we'll wait till later. But it's funny. So I was like, "That's fine." I was like, "I have no problem, getting whoever on, and and getting them at whatever part of the process, because you have a very different perspective, I think, than some other people we've had on. So it's always awesome to get people at whatever part they are in their process, and to kind of you get a little glimpse in there, which I think is cool. So really looking forward to seeing what happens with this book, since it just released. But definitely excited to see where you're at from this book to book 3. I think it'd be really cool to see that jump. So really look forward to talking to you about that whole process. So cool. What is next for you, Michael Webb? I like that question. What is next for you?
The next thing coming up is audiobook. Cool. I've signed a contract with Podium. They're producing audiobooks right now, which I'm so pumped about. I have Tim Campbell. He's won Audio Awards for audiobook narrating. He is fantastic. Yeah, he's recording them right now. So February 8th, The Last Shadow Knight comes out, and then Rise of the Shadow will probably be April, I would guess, and then of course Shadow of Destiny. It's not, once it comes out, we'll record that one. So that's coming up soon, and then the third book, Shadow of Destiny, that'll round out the trilogy. It's currently on Amazon for pre-order, August 17th, I think I have. I'm going to try to get it earlier though. It'll just depend on how long it takes me to get it all together. So then long term, I've got more in my head. I want to stay in the Shadow Knights world. I've got a second trilogy that's going to take place not just after, a few years after the current one.
Oh,
so
cool.
This trilogy is one big story arc. It's an epic battle, good versus evil, but it has a beginning and an end. And but then I want another trilogy that's the same character, same setting, just a little bit farther down the road, to have a different story arc. And then I'm planning a prequel series called the Shadow Knights Academy. That's going to be like 200 years before.
Oh, cool.
It covers more like the Shadow Knights and the different adventures and stuff they go on. So I'm excited. I got lots of plans for it. My hope at some point, it'd be nice to write full time. Right now, I'm just trying to eke every hour that I can into getting writing in, but that's tough when you got other job that you're dealing with. So, but yeah, lots of fun stuff to come.
Yeah, that's super cool. That excites me because it kind of drives me crazy when somebody has a great trilogy and I read it and then they go off to a different world. Like I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I actually really like that, like how you space that out. So that's really exciting. I got a lot of Amazon cards coming for Christmas and things, and my wife's gonna get me a Kindle for Christmas. So I'm excited to get yours and a bunch of other people we've had on there. So yeah, that's exciting to hear. Yeah,
Cool.
I like to keep reading in the same world, especially if it's a world I enjoy. So that's exciting.
Right. Yeah, that's the hope.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then that last question. So do you have any promos or anything like that going on? You talked about current project. Obviously, book 2's out. Where can people find book 2, book 1? Obviously, Amazon. Any other places or anything like that?
Yep. So Amazon's my main site I sell from. I have autographed copies on my website. That's michaelwebbnovels.com. Also have Shadow Knights merch. I have t-shirts, hats, beanies, hoodies, a lot of different stuff. I had a logo developed, Shadow Knights Academy, as well as I got this cool logo that's like a Shadow Knights. It's like a SK with the sword. I have stickers, I have hats. So a lot of people have been getting for Christmas presents.
Oh, cool.
Readers, they're like, oh, this is awesome. And it's just, it's free publicity for me, and able to, it all goes out online. I don't have to touch it, which is nice. But yeah, so michaelwebbnovels.com. You can check out information about my books. You can get merch. You can order books. You can also get from Amazon. But then, the biggest news I have is my new Rise of the Shadow just launched, and then the audiobook coming out February 8th. So that'll be a whole new market. I know you have readers and you have audiobook listeners, and this is a whole new market I'm excited to be able to tap into. So see how that goes. I've had a lot of people that, I tell them my book's out. They're like, oh, is it an audiobook? Because that's all I do. I'm like, it's not yet. But it was fun because they came to me. I wasn't going to do an audiobook, but The Last Shadow Knight was doing so well that they say, hey, are the rights available? We'd love to talk to you about contracting to have them produced. I'm like, sure, yeah, let's talk. It just wasn't even on my radar, and I don't know much about how to do that. And that's what they do. That's so Podium is a fantastic company for fantasy and sci-fi, especially. They do a very professional audiobook. So I'm excited. It's not going to be me recording it and kind of making it sound decent. It's going to be an actual publishing company that puts it together. So it's going to be legit. So yeah, can't wait to hear what that final product looks like.
Yeah, I'm excited. We'll have to have you back in the around that time, like maybe like early March, because I'm trying to have my friend Christopher Brennan come back too. He's got like the Hellborn King. I read it. It was awesome. And I only listen to audiobooks that I've already read, because otherwise I want to read them. I've had experiences in the past.
Yeah.
I tried to go back and it kind of ruined the experience for me, but I found I liked it this way. But so I'm listening to his and I'm like, man, oh man. And it's funny because he said that he sold it within like, I think it was like maybe 3 weeks, he sold more copies for the audiobook than he did for the actual book. I mean,
wow.
Crazy. It's really crazy to think about. I mean, he's got a great cover, great blurb. It's a great thickness and it just looks great, like a great product. But to me, it'd be great to have you guys back and, separately or maybe together. talk about
Love
that
to.
process. Yeah, that'd be really cool. Because again, like you said, that's a whole different market, and I don't think a lot of people
Mhm.
are talking about it for some reason. So I think that's a great
Hmm.
marketing strategy. But cool. Well,
Yep.
Michael, we really want to thank you for coming on. Again,
Mhm.
anybody in our audience, if you know anybody, like you have great authors that you're reading like Michael, and you want them to come on, and you have somebody who's like, oh, I got this great product that's about to come out, send them my way. We want people, everybody's welcome here. If you are into fantasy and sci-fi, obviously. Thank you everybody again for coming on to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. Again, you can find this video on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. We're redoing the website right now. So in about 2 weeks, about a week after this episode is published, you'll be able to go on and find everything on the website. And obviously the audio is going to be on Spotify RSS feed. And do want to just tell everybody right now that we are actually trying to get on Apple Podcast as well. So that's going to be something we work on. So hopefully by the time we get this one aired for Michael and you guys, we'll already be on Apple Podcasts. We're really excited about that. Feel free to reach us at Scholars of Uma, that's UMA@gmail.com. If you have any questions for us or Michael, we'd love to give those comments and, like, hey, we really liked your book, things like that. We'll send those to Michael, any other author that's been on. If you guys have any questions to ask Michael or future guests, send those to us. Any pictures, videos that are fantasy or sci-fi related, we'd love to post those on the website and our social media. Michael, again, thank you so much. Good luck with book 2. I'm really looking forward to seeing
Thanks.
you climb. I hope you reach, even greater success than book 1, and, good luck with book 3. And again, love to have you on, for either, the Audible or Podium, the audiobook, or, book 3 in the spring, help you with those promotion sales and stuff like that. So
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Daniel. It's been
yeah,
great.
of course. I'll see you on social media, my friend. You have a good rest of the day and enjoy your weekend. Okay.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
Bye.